Hey, Crawl Spacers, welcome to a special episode. We've got an author on this episode. He wrote a new book called Spider-Man, Web-Slinger, Hero and Icon. So let's introduce our guest. We've got Rich Johnson. Welcome, Rich. Welcome to the
Thanks,
show.
Pat.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good. Well, you've got a very, very heavy coffee table book. We're going to talk about this new
Yes.
book you put out.
As I said, you can kill a man with that book.
You
It's pretty heavy.
it works as a history book and a weapon. If you would like.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, love the back cover too. The Del Auto art is just
Yeah, it's
beautiful.
gorgeous. It is
Just
gorgeous.
beautiful. So, talk a bit about this book. How did this book come about for you?
Well, let me give you my background a little bit. It sort of explains
Okay.
it. And let me just, state right off the bat, you guys are the Spider-Man experts, not me. I mean,
Okay.
clearly from behind you, you're neck deep in Spider-Man.
You don't have the underoos behind you like I do?
Maybe they're on. I'm not gonna divulge that. So my background is, I read comics as a kid. I kind of got out of it, in high school and college. I got back in because I'm old in 1986 when Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns came out,
Right.
and I was like, what is this thing? In 1997, I got a job at DC Comics to be national accounts manager, which meant I was to sell graphic novels into anything that wasn't a comic shop,
Okay.
which meant bookstores, libraries, international sales a little bit. I set up the first distribution deal in Canada for DC Comics for bookstores. And back in 1997, there was no graphic novel section in bookstores or libraries.
Right.
It was usually, 4 or 5 books jammed in at the end of the science fiction fantasy section.
Yep.
And those books were usually Watchmen, Dark Knight Returns, maybe a Star Wars or Star Trek graphic novel, maybe one of the Marvel essentials, and that was it. And I got beaten up a lot for it. I would go my very first sales call for DC was with a major buyer at a major bookstore chain, and the first sentence out of their mouth was, "Graphic novels are dead."
Wow.
Like, okay, but they kind of weren't wrong at the time. I
Right.
mean, they've sprung up in bookstores over the years, helter skelter, like Dark Knight and Watchmen, a little bit of Sandman from Neil Gaiman. Mouse made a big impact when it
Right.
hit the Times bestseller list and won the Pulitzer. But my job was to try to find not the Wednesday warrior who's going to the comic shops, but the more casual consumer, kind of like me at the time. I did shop comic book shops, but it was the person who was a lapsed reader or maybe a new reader who
Mhm.
might want to get into comics without devoting a lot of money and going there every Wednesday to pick up the single issues. They just want a good story about one of their favorite superheroes.
Mhm.
So that was kind of my mission. And that's partly why I'm doing these books, because these books are really the purpose of these. They're not deep histories, they're not encyclopedias.
Mhm.
The real purpose is to get new readers. I mean, if you walk into a bookstore or comic shop and you've just seen the latest Spider-Man movie or the latest Captain America or whatever else,
Right.
there's a wall of books there, and you're like, where do I begin?
Mhm.
How do I start this? I want to read this stuff, but I have no idea. And sometimes with continuity for both Marvel and DC, it can be kind of confusing to jump in. So
It's
what we did,
60 years of history. It's a hard to get in
it is.
60 years about in front of you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like a
Yeah.
movie like, Twilight or even Watchmen, where there's one book that's the source material. And you can pick that up and read it and enjoy it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's a tough way to enter in with all the continuities. So the
Mhm.
book is set up, for instance, the Captain America book, which was first.
Right.
The idea was, um, I spoke to the editor, Jessica Fuller at Rizzoli, and she was looking for a writer. And I had a few people in mind, and she goes, "Well, would you like to write these?" I'm like, "Well, sure." Then
Mhm.
she said, "Would you like to write all 5 of them?" I'm like, oh, "Okay." So we're going to do 5.
Okay.
The first 2 are out, Captain America and Spider-Man.
Have you announced the one after the Hulk? The Hulk's coming out next after
We have
Spidey.
not.
Okay.
We have not.
Yeah.
Um, so, my idea for the book was, how do you help people enter this world? How do you give them a sort of a leg up in what to read? So the idea was to divide them up by the level of knowledge you need to know about that character in order to really understand the story.
Right.
So for Captain America, we did it by military levels because that just made sense.
Right.
It was private, corporal, sergeant, and captain. So at the
Hmm.
private level, you need to know nothing about Captain America. They're like the origin stories. Then as you get higher to the captain level, the more continuity you're going to need to know.
Right.
So my job, much like what I had to do when I was a sales rep for DC, was when you sit in front of a buyer, like when Borders is around or Barnes and Noble,
Hmm.
my job is to very briefly describe the story to them and try to entice them to buy the book. Um, Sometimes you're lucky and the buyer will have a knowledge of graphic novels. Sometimes, particularly in the early days, they had no idea what comics were,
Yeah.
and they kind of had to trust me to guide them along. So I had to give them a reason why they should buy these things.
Well, you can't argue with the brand recognition of Batman or Superman or Spider-Man on the shelf. I mean, that probably helped a bit, I would
It,
think.
it did,
Yeah.
but even then, the mere format of comics had been tried before. In the mid 80s, Dark Knight Returns came out. I remember I was at Walden Books at the time. They did sort of a pleather version of the complete Frank Miller,
Right.
and DC had a deal with Warner Brothers, and they just didn't sell that well. Dark Knight
Hmm.
sold like crazy.
Right.
Watchmen sold like crazy, but then nothing else seemed to work.
Hmm.
So it was sort of a slow going there. And my job was, wherever I went, was to find the geek. If the buyer didn't know anything about comics, I had to find somebody in the building who did, to prove to them that the collected editions, the hardcovers and the trades, had an audience.
And you said this was in the late 90s, right? So,
Late 90s, starting in
and and
1997.
and what year did it just jump? The slow built up and
It
boomed.
built up. Um, a lot of things happened.
Uh,
Like there were times when I sort of had to help manipulate who was buying them
mm.
at retail. At Walden Books, you remember that old chain with the mall
And
stores?
we had one in the mall. Yep, I miss
Yep.
it.
I do too.
Yeah.
Um, the We were being bought by the magazine buyer because we had that old spinner rack.
Oh yeah.
DC had so many pockets, Marvel had so many pockets, and I had
Hmm.
4 pockets for graphic novels, and that was it.
Oh wow.
And the buyer told me, well, the new Star Wars movie's coming out, so we're going to devote the entire rack to Star Wars. I'm like, the pockets that I own? But I'm supposed to put like anything I want in there? So I kind of convinced a book buyer to pick up the category, an old friend of mine named
Mhm.
Stu Carter. Um, it was a slow build. It built over the years. Librarians honestly were quicker to pick up on it than retailers.
Yeah.
They really got into graphic novels because they learned that two things. One, it was good for reluctant readers.
Yep.
Two, they were some of the highest circulated books in the library. And that's how you determine the success of a book in a library.
Right.
It's how
How
many
many times
times
it's
it gets
checked out?
checked out.
Yeah.
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 Um, I remember at one library convention, people were complaining about the binding, and the bindings were just like any other trade paperback.
Right.
But they said they were falling apart, and one librarian said, "Check out how many times they're taken out. They're just getting read to death." She goes, "What I do is I hole punch them, I put a ring binder through it, and I call them pierced books, and kids can still read them."
Well, there you go. Yeah.
So it kind of accumulated and came to a head in 2003 for me when we did Sandman Endless Nights,
Mm,
and it hit the New York Times bestseller list,
that's awesome. That's
which
awesome.
was cool. Yeah.
Well, back in the late 90s, was there a manga section also? Because
No.
okay, so that kind of
No.
out off spurred because I a couple weeks ago I was in Barnes and Noble, and by the way, your book is in Barnes and Noble in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I saw it, but all that aisle getting down to where the graphic novels and the manga because they were back to back.
Yeah.
It was shoulder to shoulder, and the other aisles of the mystery and the romance, etc., was not packed. I just was like, well, I've got to wait my turn to get down this aisle. So
It was like that.
2022,
That started in the early 2000s when
yeah,
a couple things happened. One was when a guy named Jim Killen became the buyer for graphic novels at Barnes and Noble,
uh
and a guy named Kurt Hassler became the buyer for first Walden and then Borders, in both of them.
okay,
Um, Kurt was a really big manga fan. As a matter of fact, he and I co-founded the imprint Yen Press.
hmm
Um, Back in the 2000s, manga became very big because Kurt was a big fan, Jim was a big fan, and they sort of pushed into the stores, and teenagers bought it. But then, right around the time we started Yen Press, it sort of dropped really hard and really fast. It went from, I think, a 70 odd million dollar business to like 35 million.
wow,
Um, I think it was a little bit cyclical, but now it's back, and it's back with a vengeance.
It is, especially
It's
in
huge.
yeah, no
It's
doubt.
just huge.
Um, so you convincing the librarians and convincing the book buyers for those Borders and Books a Million, etc. That's the key. And once you convince them, let's start printing
Then they had
money.
to sell. Then
Yeah,
they had
they
to
had to
sell.
sell. Yeah,
So
yeah,
we did things like you won't be able to see the poster here, but you know, there used to be a show called Book Expo. It
okay,
was an industry show where um, all the major publishers had booths, kind of like an industry version of Comic Con,
right,
but without fans. It's all
okay.
industry.
Oh, okay.
So
So the book buyers who stock the stores,
yeah,
that's
retailers
where
came,
they order.
independent
Yeah,
bookstores, librarians came.
right.
Sometimes the chain buyers would come from Barnes and Noble or Borders or Amazon or wherever. So we had a booth there, and I grew the booth to be over 1,000 square feet. It was just this massive booth because I wanted to prove to the industry, the book industry, that comics, graphic novels were a valid form of literature,
Yep.
that there are fans out there who want to read them. So, we would have Frank Miller signing at the booth. We'd had
Mhm.
Alex Ross. We had Jill Thompson, Brian Azzarello. We made a big deal out of it. There was an event in New York called New York is Book Country where I kind of took it over. They usually do only one poster a year, and I was convinced they would do another one. And we had this great Jim Lee poster of Superman and Batman swinging through the streets of New York. So I was trying to establish us as an entity in the publishing world too.
Yeah. Well, it worked.
It did, believe it or
um,
not.
let's talk about. We talked about your history with comics, etc. Talk about Spider-Man. What was your first introduction to Spider-Man? Where did you first see him?
I was a kid.
Yeah.
How
Is
I
it
bought my
Electric Company like me on PBS? That's where I first
I'm
saw
a
it.
wee bit older than you, Brad.
Yeah.
No, I was a little kid in the 1960s.
Yep.
I would get my allowance, and across from my grade school, there was like a mom and pop grocery store, and they had stacks of comics just lined up on the bottom shelf so kids could look at it. And I'd
Hmm.
use my allowance and just buy a ton of comics.
Right.
I'd buy Batman and Superman and Justice League and Spider-Man and um, Fantastic Four, and I used to love pretending I was Sergeant Fury. I'd get the pretzel cigar and bite one end off and pretend it
There
was
you
a
go.
cigar. So that was my introduction, was
You go
reading the
home and
comics
watch
back
the
in the late
'67
60s.
cartoon also with that theme song.
Absolutely. Yeah, the
Yeah,
theme song is still in my head.
it's on loop in mine. I know.
Yeah.
Let's take a look inside of the book. You can buy it on Amazon right now. The book is called Web-Slinger, Hero and Icon. Uh, on all your books, Hero and Icon. Is this what you call all these books, the Hero Icon series, or
Yeah, so that's sort of the branding for them,
yeah?
yeah.
There you go. So we're going to take a look inside the book. So let me go back to here. We've got some preview art inside the book. Beautiful looking cover. You've got
Yeah.
some Ditko back here, and beautiful
And the
cover.
book is designed by a woman named Maria Cabardo.
Okay.
Maria worked years ago at DC Comics.
Hmm.
She actually packaged the first Halo graphic novel for Marvel.
Oh, nice.
She's immensely talented, and the books are just
Yeah,
gorgeous.
that's what I was going to talk about. So it's just one woman that did all this. That's a lot
Yeah,
of work.
the process is,
Yeah.
um, I have access to Marvel Unlimited on my iPad,
Right.
so I go through and I take screenshots of the art I like,
Uh
and
huh.
we pull a lot of art. We send it out to Marvel. They give us the files for it, and we divide it up by story, and then
Uh huh.
Maria just picks what she wants
Yep.
and lays it out. We get feedback from Marvel and Disney about it. Like maybe change this image or swap this out or do whatever.
Like this
But
kind of
yeah,
stuff is just beautiful with the webs behind it, and we
yeah,
can talk about the different chapters. You took 60 years of Spider-Man history and divided it into 4 chapters. It's not a history book that you said though.
no,
It's
it's not. We
yeah.
wanted to avoid that.
Hmm.
Marvel does a lot of other books with a lot of other great publishers. Like DK does a lot of encyclopedias
Yeah.
and books about Spider-Man and all the other Marvel characters. So we wanted to take a different approach and really focus on
Hmm.
what are the stories about and what is the art behind the stories.
Right.
So what I do is I give, you know, 400 or 500, 600 word descriptions where I try not to tell too much about the story, but just enough to make you want to read it.
Right.
and then the beautiful art surrounding it hopefully will bring you in more.
So chapter 1, Friendly Neighborhood, talking about his first appearances, and
Yep.
also you do have that beautiful, Tim Sale, who just passed away, Spider-Man Blue, and Jeff
Yeah.
Loeb mini. Yeah,
If you're not a Tim Sale fan, if you don't know him, please look him up.
yeah. He's
Um, he
art's
was
right
always one
down
of my
there.
favorite artists.
Yeah.
I think what he and Loeb did for DC and for Marvel are both are there seems to be like a weight to it, an importance to what they
Right,
do, and their art style is sort of old school but fresh. You
right.
know what I mean?
And then chapter 2 is called Amazing, where you take a look at the Gwen Stacy, death
Yep.
of Jean DeWolf, Craven, the Clone Saga, the Hobgoblin, McFarlane's Torment, and some spider variants of Miles Morales Noir, The Birth of Venom, Maximum Carnage, and Coming Home. And then chapter Neighborhood Watch is a bunch of pictures of, I guess it was production stills, or what was it
Yeah,
from the movies?
those are production art
Yeah,
pieces from the MCU.
right.
So the purpose of those, when we have a little section in each of the books where we're
Hmm.
trying to show how the MCU really used these comics as a resource,
Yeah,
and how some of the panels even sort of mirror what's on the screen or what's drawn.
I love that
The
Todd
reference book.
McFarlane right down there too.
Yeah.
That's good looking McFarlane. Chapter 3 is called Spectacular. You take a look at Spider Gwen, Dan Slott's Big Time and Spider Verse and Worldwide, and then Back to Basics by Nick Spencer, and Among the Dead, The Venomous, and The Last Stand, and one of my personal favorites, Spider Ham. And then you go to the Ultimates, is chapter 4. Not just Ultimate Spider-Man, but you do Bag in Black, which led up to Civil War, and the end of the marriage with One More Day and Brand New Day. Parker Luck, My Worst Enemy, The Clone Conspiracy, Spider-Geddon, and the Ultimate Death of Spider-Man. You wrap it up with. I guess why not end with the death? Of course.
Well, it kind of made sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So we'll take.
And how we
Yeah.
picked the stories, I looked online, like,
Hmm.
what did the fans like? What
Right.
are sites saying are the best Spider-Man stories? And then I
Right.
went off and looked at my own, and there's some things I knew I wanted to put in regardless, like the
Right.
Tim Sale piece. I really
Yep.
wanted Spider-Man Blue in there. And then we presented to the editors at Marvel. They say, yeah, this one, how about this one instead? Or we kind of go back and forth a little bit on it.
And you said the designer is Maria. Is that her name?
Yeah, Maria Cabardo.
Yep. There's her title right there.
And actually, if you
Um,
want to look at the name above that, go
okay.
back for 1 sec.
Yep.
Elise Johnson,
Uh huh.
it's my daughter.
Oh, so this is a father-daughter deal.
She works at Rizzoli.
Oh, that's so cool. Is it well, if she's your editorial assistant, you have to take notes from your daughter? Is that how that works? Because I do it every
Sure,
day.
sure, he did. And
She was
my
like,
actually my
Dad, you're too wordy," or
and
whatever.
well, and my wife is a copy editor, and she copy edited these books. So
Oh, that's cool.
it was a little bit from both of them. Like, honey, you could have done a little bit better on that essay. Why don't you go back and rewrite it?
Oh, that's funny.
You know, and Ellie is more like Daddy on a schedule.
She
Put
hits you
the
on the deadline.
put the
Yeah.
the Xbox controller down and go do some writing.
I in your introduction, the line that I really like, because you talk about how Spider-Man is us,
He
and
is.
the sentence, even with all the quote, even with all the power and responsibility that Spider-Man carries, we'd be willing to suffer that spider bite, wouldn't we? I like that line. I thought that was really well
Thank you.
written, and it's true. You'd have to lose your uncle, but that spider bite's worth it for what all the adventures you'd have. I talk about that line specific. I love
Well,
that
actually,
line.
the inflection at the end is, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
Like, maybe?
Oh,
Because for
okay.
me, there's a question there because, with great power comes great responsibility, and he has to sacrifice a lot to do what he does.
Right.
At the very beginning, he sacrificed his uncle by not
Hmm.
acting on that. One of my favorite stories, One More Day, which I think is just hugely emotional. And I do think at the heart of it, um, I think Spider-Man are kind of romance comics. They're
Oh yeah.
relationship comics
Yep.
because it really is about, the people he loves and protecting them and making sure they're okay and not putting them in danger. Um,
That was probably Stan's intent by hiring John Romita, who used to draw romance comics. Because
yeah,
you can't
exactly.
beat the look
I
of Mary
never put
Jane and
that.
Gwen Stacy. I mean, they're straight out of those romance comics.
I never put two and two together, but you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, they're big part. Romita's girls are so much more attractive than Ditko's, with all respect to Ditko's, but you can't beat Mary Jane.
Well, and also I really do love the way Tim Salen draws both of them.
Yes. Yep. Again, great design. It looks like the a little bit of back of the spider emblem behind on this image. Great
Yep.
design.
Hmm.
There you go. Speak of the, there you go. You got Tim Sale's art right there. Here's a little bit of chapter one, some Ultimate Spider-Man, Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Bagley on art and on writing.
Good comics. And the other
Yep.
amazing thing about Spider-Man was, it only took a couple of years to get all the major villains down.
It did. Yes, it did. By about issue 50, when the Kingpin came out, most of them were there.
They were there.
Ditko and
Lizard
Ramita.
was there. Doc Ock
Yep.
was there. I mean, they were all there very early on. I mean, you can look at some of the other covers. I think issue 4 is that Lizard, maybe.
Uh, 6, I
But they
think, is
came
Lizard.
very,
But
very
yeah.
quickly.
Yep. And people often comment how a lot of Spider-Man's villains are green. Like Ditko loves green, so there's Goblin's green,
They
Doc
are.
Ock's got green,
Yeah.
Lizard's green, Scorpion's
Yep.
green. It
Yep.
was probably the same deal. Like they had the problems with the Hulk. They wanted him gray, but green is the one that printed well in the
Yeah,
60s.
exactly.
So
And the next book coming up is the Hulk.
yeah, that's my second favorite hero, Caps 3. I'm looking forward to your Hulk book. We'll have to
Oh,
talk
good,
about that.
good.
That'd be fun. Here we go. We got some Amazing Fantasy 15 here. Some more early images. We've got the classic split face here, which is a Ditko trademark, which I absolutely love. There you go. XU6. That's what we're talking about. The lizard. Yep. And the Sandman.
Oh, poor Sandman.
Yep. And he's got green shirt. So there you go. Keeping with the green theme.
Yeah, that's funny.
And the 2000s, where Marvel was looking kind of like you were looking for a new market with trades, they were looking for younger readers with Ultimate Spider-Man.
What do you think of the Ultimate Spider-Man? Did you like it?
I did for parts of
I'm
it.
hesitant a little bit, Brad.
Yeah, well, there on my website and my podcast, people are very divided. The people over 30 are not as fond of it as the people under. So it hits the mark of grabbing now that's a 20-year-old book, 22-year-old book.
Yeah.
So I started in the 80s, maybe late 70s, reading Spider-Man. So I'm not the demographic for it. But I do enjoy Mark Bagley's art. There's some things that they did in the books, such as making Gwen Stacy Carnage. I don't really dig. And I don't really like this Goblin. I think he looks like the Hulk.
Okay.
But you know what? It did what it set out to do. It introduced a whole new generation to Spider-Man, which is
Right.
not a bad thing. So
And they did make May and Ben a little bit younger.
they did. They made them hippies. Uncle Ben had a
He had a
man
ponytail.
bun.
He had a
Yeah,
man
he had
bun, yeah.
had a man bun. But I wish we had a picture. Actually, I don't wish we had a picture of the man bun. But
There
but
might be one in there.
yep. There we're talking about now. Look at that. There we're talking about Mary Jane. You can't beat Tim Sale's Mary Jane right there. That looks beautiful. But that is a 20-year-old book now, isn't it? That's so crazy.
Yes, it is. And I think they're
20-year-old
bringing
book.
it back into print. I really hope so.
Yeah, it is a great telling of his love affair with Gwen Stacy.
Hmm.
Um,
I know I won't name who, but I know a very prominent comic book artist who, when I first got to know him about over 20 years ago, he
mhm.
told me how the death of Gwen Stacy just ruined his childhood.
Eh,
And I was emotionally destroyed by it.
oh man. Well, we have similar fans that say that about the marriage going away too, and which is now 10 plus years of
Yeah.
Mary Jane him. Check out that moped. Gotta love that. And more images inside. Got a great looking Alex Ross over here. I think that's from Marvels.
Yeah, I love Alex.
Yeah.
I mean, between Marvels and, Kingdom Come, and I've yet to read his new Fantastic Four book.
I bought it. I got it in the mail the other day. I have not read it, but it looks beautiful. He's going for the Kirby 60s vibe in it with all
the
crazy colors.
The color scheme is sort of
Mhm.
almost neon in a way.
It is. It's something I've never seen, but that looks so cool.
Yeah. And Alex is a great guy. He's a nice guy.
I've never interviewed him or met him, but I've been a fan since the Marvels. Death of Gwen Stacy, very big highlight. Spider-Man was 10 years in and he lost the love of his life. So you talk about how you say it's a tough time for Peter Parker. His best friend and roommate Harry is on drugs.
Which was a big
And
thing at the time.
yep,
Comics were becoming serious in
yep.
the late 60s, early 70s.
And Stan said, "Let's bypass the comics code. Let's just go ahead and print them." So I thought that was awesome.
I was actually at DC right at the end of the Comics Code Authority.
Where it went away. Yep. And honestly, do you think any parent looked at that and said, "Nope, it's not got the seal of approval"?
I've given lectures and
Yep.
I've even taught classes about comics, and I think what was horrible about that time was that because of the Comics Code, because of the book Seduction of the Innocent, it
Mm-hmm.
really stifled the development of the medium in this country for years.
Yeah, I agree.
Unlike in other countries like France,
Mm,
where comics were an everyday thing. I mean, you walk into a
right.
bookstore in France, there are tons of BDs, bande soleils there. It's a different world.
Right.
Um, but do I think that parents actually looked at that? I don't know if they knew what it meant.
Yeah. Same. I agree. I agree. We've got the death of Mr. Stacy
Yep.
here from the 70s. And one of my favorites, this Peter David, Rich Butler is a classic with this, The Death of Gene DeWolf. Love this story.
Oh,
Did you
really? Okay.
it was one of the first trades I ever bought in the 80s when Marvel put out little thin, not thin, but it was a trade. I have distinct memory of buying that. It's probably one of my first trades. But
What 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 made this story one of your favorites?
well, it was the editor wanted the different Spider-Man titles to have a different taste. So Amazing is the classic Spider-Man tale. Web, he was supposed to be moving around doing pictures for the Bugle. The Spectacular Spider-Man was supposed to be the Law and Order, the gritty book. And as a kid, I was like, whoa, this is kind of cool. I was like 12 or 13 when I read this.
Mhm.
And I thought, ooh, this is just gritty. You don't see Spider-Man and uh, this violent, and there was a
It was
cliffhanger where
violent
you
at the time.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was violent, and you didn't see. I thought Betty Brant was dead. I had to wait a month to find out she wasn't at the in one of these chapters. So it was a good cliffhanger. It had an early writer by the name of Peter David that was showing his early chops, and just really well done, I thought. So, and the art is beautiful, just well done. So,
What are some of your favorite Spider-Man stories? Okay,
um,
let me put it this way:
y-
was there a story that I didn't include in the book that you're like, oh darn, I wish you would have included that?
let's see. My one of my favorites is ASM 300, which is the birth of Venom. I like that a lot. Oh, there is one. There is one that I don't think he had, which was Amazing 200, which is the Return of the Burglar.
No, it's not in there now. Yeah.
That's a classic one I liked a lot. But that's the only one that stood out. I think you hit the high points very well.
Oh, good.
But yeah. Anyway, that was the end of the previews. We've got very last preview that they have online for us to see is ends with that one. But then it goes on more talking about the variants, like Spider Gwen is within the last 10 years. You talk a bit about her in the
Hmm.
book, and Miles Morales, which my gosh, the popularity of him in the last 10 years has just gone through the roof.
Did you like the character of Miles?
I did. I do. I actually like the movie's characterization of him more than anything.
That film was
The film
stunning,
is
like
beautiful.
nothing I'd ever seen before.
It's visually cool. It's a different take on Spider-Man, and it goes back to the anyone can be behind the mask. Any
Yeah,
race or even sex can be behind the mask, which is a universal Spider-Man thing. Batman and Superman, you see their face.
yeah,
Spider-Man, you don't. So
yeah.
a lot of kids relate to that, and I think that's cool. Miles Morales, I
Uh,
think when they pulled him out of his universe and put him with ours, it takes a little bit away from it. Just as a Spider fan, it makes Spider-Man feel a little old, in my opinion, by having him being a mentor to a young kid. But
hmm. I
that's
actually
just
thought
my
it
two.
was one of the best Stanley cameos of
Oh yeah,
all those
we're
done. It was very sweet.
gives the kid the costume. Like, here you
Yeah,
go, kid.
no returns.
Let's talk
And
a
who's your
bit of.
favorite movie Spider-Man?
Well, like I said, I'm old school. So Tobey Maguire, I think, hits up the most accurate, with the exception of the organic webs coming out of
I
his
liked that. When I saw
yeah.
that, I liked that because I just think, okay, he got all these other powers, but except the webs.
Hmm.
He used to make his own webs. Even as a kid, that didn't make sense to me a little bit.
Well, if you go by what the spider is, it's kind of gross where the webs would come out from. They
Oh,
don't
we're
would.
not going there, Brad. We're going to stop right there.
Now I
Let's stop
understand.
right there.
Stan probably said, "Well, let's just have him come out of his wrists and have him make some
Yeah.
web shooters." But Tobey Maguire, I think, is a good Spider-Man. I think they stick closer to the stories. I like Tom Holland, but I don't like him as a sidekick to Iron Man. It just rubs me wrong. A lot of
Oh,
longtime
okay.
Spider-Man fans are not fans of that. But the last movie I thought was great with all the Spider
You
people in it.
skipped over Andrew Garfield.
He has a good Spider-Man. He's quick-witted, which is a trait I like. Spider-Man is not a skateboarder, and he's not that. He's just
Your
not
spirit.
that kid. Personally,
What I liked
but
about him is that, in some iterations, he's very lanky
yeah,
and sort of spider-like, and Garfield is that. And
yeah,
he's
he
much
is.
taller than the other two.
Yeah,
And like you said, he was a wise ass. He
yeah,
had a lot of quips and stuff. I liked that a lot.
exactly. Who's your favorite movie, Spidey?
You know, um, what I think it's tough. I think it might be Tom Holland only because I mean I don't know. I remember how old Tobey Maguire was when he started in that, but he always seems a little bit older. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, Tom Holland was a kid
Yeah,
when he started doing it,
yeah.
um, and he acted like a kid. And
Mm-hmm.
I really like seeing that progression of him. Even saying things like when he sees Winter Soldiers, like, "You've got a metal arm? Oh, that's so cool." Really acting like a kid,
That's a teenager.
learning his chops. Tobey Maguire always seemed a little, and I think he's great, a little older, a little more
Yeah.
mature than certainly Tom Holland was.
Well, I do like that in the second movie they put him in college, so that tied into it. My personal
Sure.
favorite, I think we've gone to the well of the high school a little bit too much in 60 years. I like the college years where he's been doing it for a few years, so that's why I'm excited for the next Tom Holland. He'll be in college, so he'll have some
Yeah,
experience a little bit.
yeah.
So they set that up perfectly. We've
I thought the
got
second one by Sam Raimi was amazing. It's really like this
yes,
horror
it's
movie.
still holds up. It still holds
Oh yeah,
up.
it does. It's a great movie.
Uh,
Shot really beautifully. Yeah.
we if you'd like to ask Rich some questions or me some questions, feel free in the chat. I think we have your biggest fan called Ultimate Spider-Man Plush. He just yells, "Rich!"
I don't know who that is, but
I don't
thank you,
know.
Ultimate Spider-Man plush.
He wants to know about the Spider-Man and Ren and Stimpy crossover comic. I don't know if you know
See,
anything about
I
that.
don't know that. I know nothing about that.
There was one. It was a comic. It was one of Dan Slott who did the Big Time. It was one of his very first Spider-Man stories he ever wrote. So I don't know why you want to talk about that Spider-Man plush, but go ahead. A couple more questions for you before we move on to the Captain America book. Do you have a soft spot of Spider-Man history, or when you're looking through all this? Mine is the '80s with the Hobgoblin and Venom. That's my favorite era. Do you have an era that you liked when you were researching?
I think the probably my sweet spot is a little bit the '60s, only because that's when I
Yep.
first was introduced to him.
Yeah.
When he was that skinny kid with the big glasses. Although I really, with the way comics have changed and the way the art has changed and the panel progressions and everything else,
Yeah.
reading the more recent issues, I really love the run um, where Doc Ock is Spider-Man.
Oh,
I thought that
Superior.
was
Yeah.
great. I thought that was really interesting.
Right.
So I'm really enjoying the modern day stuff
Yep.
a lot, honestly.
That's awesome. Uh, Good time to be a comic fan. Any when you're doing the research and you're looking through the Marvel Unlimited, anything that popped out at you that you were like, I didn't know that about Spider-Man, or something fun or unique that you found?
Let me think, because the process was, reading it again or for the first time,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes I have to go back and do some research and do some
Right.
checking on the internet or go back and read another issue. Like, okay, they referenced something here, so I have
Right.
to go back and look at something else. Um, I don't think anything really surprised me or caught me off guard.
Mm-hmm.
Um, no, I don't think so. I
Okay.
can't think of anything.
We've got a question from Matt. He wants to know your favorite animated series of Spidey.
The original.
Yeah.
I
67.
mean, again, that's that kid thing in you, where
Yeah.
the theme song go. It's just like Captain America too. I mean, I've got that theme song in my head.
Oh, Captain America. Yeah.
Throws his mighty shield. Yeah.
Weird trivia. He just passed away. Paul Soles was the voice of Spider-Man in the 67 cartoon. He was also the voice actor of the little elf in the
Oh,
Rudolph the Red-Nosed. He
he was
was
Herbie.
he was Herbie. Yeah, the
He was
dentist.
Herbie.
I, I interviewed him before he passed away. He was such a nice man.
Oh,
And he said he has little ornaments on his trees of Hermie the dentist and
sweet.
Spider-Man together. So it's neat it's weird to have those two
I want to be a
characters.
dentist. Yeah,
Yeah, I want to
I
be
love
a
Herbie.
dentist. Yep. So your
I
other book.
also really love the
Yeah.
Spider-Man video games from Sony.
Oh yeah, they
You play
are
them, Brad?
amazing. Yes, I play them on PlayStation, and I played the Miles Morales one, which was good. But I remember in the 80s, the Atari game of the little red pixel and
Yep.
the little green pixel were the Green Goblin and Spidey, and I thought that is the best it's ever going to get.
Well, the very first Marvel
Yeah.
game was the Spider-Man game.
It
I think
was
it's probably
from
that one.
Activision.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And I was so happy to play that in 1982. I thought it was so cool. But that latest game is just the best I've ever seen. It's like watching a movie.
Beautifully rendered. The streets of New
Yep.
York. It's like, I know that neighborhood.
Yep.
I live in northern New Jersey, not too far from Manhattan. So
Right.
it was a great story.
It was.
Yep. Both of them. Like them
I agree.
a lot.
Looking forward to the next one. It's supposed to come out in 2023, I think. So
I think so.
year. Yeah. So your other book that came out earlier this summer was Captain America, Avenger, Hero and Icon. So talk about this book that came out. You had 80 years to look at for this guy.
Yeah.
Not 60.
And it's interesting how because of when he, went missing and came back, it's always interesting to see in the comics, like as it ages, like how far back they have brought him back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like in the 60s, it was just like 20 years ago he went disappearing. But when they do other sort of origin stories, it's a little bit different. Now, reading this, I have to admit I hadn't read a whole bunch of Captain America, but I really grew to really, really like the character. I remember when the movie was coming out, much like Superman, they say, it's a dated character. It's a, shucks kind of character. But I love the way the movie still made him relevant. They sort of embraced that.
Right.
That he was this, big nerd from the 1940s. And I like in the comics how they made it really from a war comic to a spy comic. Yeah. In my mind.
Yeah.
With
Nick Fury.
Yeah. With Fury and with everything else.
Right.
With Hydra, there's still echoes from the 40s, but I liked how they made it really sort of a spy game.
Yeah, no doubt. I hope the farther we get away from World War II, and if they never take that aspect away from the character, like make him a Vietnam vet or Gulf War vet. World War II is just something about that character that is so tied. I
actually have an idea for Captain America's story.
Okay.
I don't know if I should say it. I haven't pitched it to Marvel yet.
Don't pitch it. You might lose money. Someone will be watching and steal the idea.
I know, steal the idea.
Here, I've got some images of the book we can look through too and talk a bit about that. Same designer from the Spider-Man book.
Maria's doing all of them. Yeah,
got it. You know what? This isn't showing that I want to show you that I loved. I don't think it showed in the other one with the preview images. When you open the book,
the end papers.
You've got. Oh, just hit my mic. I love the spider logos on the front, and when you open the Cap book, you've got all the shields, which is really cool looking.
I'm really glad you liked that because I remember when we got all these assets from Marvel.
Yeah.
And I saw that, like this wallpaper of it. I'm like, that has to be the end papers because that is just so cool.
Ironically, I use that as my logo on the back of the broadcast. I've got spider logos behind it. So so that just stood out. I thought that looked cool. But here's some images from inside the book here. You've got, here we go. You said we divided it like we did Spider-Man, 4 different chapters.
Yep.
Private is the Golden Age. So you're back to the very beginnings and the adventures of Captain America Sentinel of Liberty. I like one. Is that the one in the book where you talk about it's like a
It's an
buffet,
origin
or
story. It's an
uh,
origin story. Like
one of
it
them was a buffet of Cap? If what you would like, that might have been later.
yeah,
Um,
the adventures of the Sentinel of Liberty is one where he I forget the creative team off the top of my head,
I think it
but
was Mark Wade and Ron Garney.
it's an origin story. I love the art. Actually, there are a couple of characters in there, villains that were only
Right.
used in that story, and I wish I would have seen more of them.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. I got the wrong creative team. That was
Yeah,
something else. But yes.
and it's a great entryway into
Yep.
the character.
And Captain America White, again, talking about Jeff Loeb and
Yep,
Tim Sale with their take also. But this one's not a love story. It's a brother story, isn't it? It's about Cap and Bucky together.
it is.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's a good one.
because the
Then,
Hulk one is a love story too. It's him
okay.
and Betty.
Oh, yeah. They've been
Remember
dating
that?
for 60 years and married
Yeah.
and divorced and all that. You
And the
hit up.
Daredevil one's a romance too. The Daredevil run from Sale and Loeb
Oh,
was a
yep.
romance. Yep.
With Karen Page. Yep.
Yep.
You hit up the Captain American Falcon Mad Bomb when Jack Kirby returned in the 70s to Marvel.
Yep.
And the next chapter is Corporal, Man Without a Country, and Nomad, which I like. I like Nomad a lot. Streets of Poison. That I remember reading that in the 90s. That was Captain America saying don't do drugs, but wait, I did drugs to get my
I am
I
who I
got
am because of drugs.
I exactly. So that was a good story back in the day. Cap and Falcon Secret Empire, where Hail Hydra. I like what your line in the book you talk about. It crashed the internet. People could not realize that Cap was a Hydra agent, and they used a little bit of that in the movie too.
Yeah, they did
Where
when he whispers in the elevator.
when he goes
Yep.
back to the elevator scene, says
Yeah.
Hail Hydra. Yeah. Sentinel of Liberty and Man Out of Time. Operation Rebirth, Life of Bucky Barnes and Cap and Bucky Old Wounds. And the command center, some pictures from the movies throughout the year. And he gets upgraded to sergeant. And you talk about the strange death of Cap, the death of the Red Skull. That's an '80s classic by Mark Gruenwald. I love that
Good
scene
one.
where the two old men just punching it out.
Yeah.
They were old men in the '80s. And the Winter Soldier is a classic. Just Ed Brubaker did a great job in the early to mid 2000s with that. And then Castaway in Dimension Z with some great art by John
I
Romita.
really love that one. That's one of
Yeah.
that's one of my favorites, I got to admit.
John Romita Jr. And his father are two of my all-time favorite Spider-Man artists. So it was great to see
And a
him
great
on that.
story by Rick Remender. It's just I
Yep, Rick
really
Remender.
fell in love with that story.
And Cap by Mr. Coates was
Yeah.
one of the most recent ones that came out. Cap, the Man with No Face, and Civil War was a classic Spider-Man story, or Cap story, and Spider-Man story for that matter.
Yeah, that one was kind of because I could have stuck that almost anywhere.
Yes.
You
Yep.
know, it could have been Spider-Man. It could be in an Avengers book. It could be in a ton of different things.
Two big things. Cap dies. Spoiler. 20-year-old spoiler. Cap dies, and Spider-Man reveals his identity. Both are very monumental to both characters. The death of Cap came right after Civil War and Road to Reborn and him coming back. Then the Hail Hydra Secret Empire and Sam Wilson taking up the mantle like he did in the movies and also in the comics a little bit. And that was the most recent miniseries, The United States of Captain America. With
that was coming out just as we were writing it, and Marvel had to get me this, the comics as they kind of came out because they weren't on Unlimited yet.
And I haven't read that, but I think isn't that various variants of Cap?
It's young kids who are taking up the mantle of Captain America because they know what he stands for.
Got it. Yeah. So here's some more. Here's your intro, and we've got some more art inside of Cap. Gotta love punching Hitler right in the mouth by Alex Ross doing
his version of it.
Yeah.
And in the script, I do write that Captain America went to war with the Nazis before America did.
Yes, he did. Yep. Then we've got you talk a bit about the Golden Age here, which it's nice to see the two different shields in your preview art. You got the circular one and the triangular one. And there's some old. It's amazing Marvel has such clear scans of these.
Yeah.
These these
And to
books
see
were meant
them
to
big
be.
like this on really heavy paper, it's
Yeah.
just gorgeous. Gorgeous
And
stuff.
they were meant to be read and thrown away essentially or beat up. It's amazing that they survived all these 80 years later.
And I have to admit, yeah, I think
Yeah.
Captain America is a little bit close to me too. My father-in-law, who we just visited,
Uh-huh.
he's 97 years old, and he's a World War II vet.
Right.
Um, he got wounded in his very first battle, in the Battle of the Bulge. He was getting on a half track. The shell blew up behind him, and the bayonet went through his chin.
Ooh, man.
Yeah. And I had the privilege of sitting with him and some of his other little band, his own little band of brothers, a couple
Yeah.
of years ago. And he's getting older. They were like getting together. It was really the final time they got together, a couple of them, for
Right.
lunch. And they all insisted I stay with them.
That's
And so I
awesome.
could hear their war stories, which were incredibly moving. They actually
Yeah.
liberated a concentration camp together at Mauthausen. So I think with Cap, because of the World War II connection, it made it a little more personal for me.
Yeah. No doubt. Here is a ad for an ad for to buy Captain America comics from the 40s. I'm thinking, yeah, copyright 1940 down there.
Yep.
Um, who wants to? There's the original Cap punching Hitler in the face right there. So here we go. Then this is what you were talking about. I could not.
Yep.
I cannot
I
think
think this
of
is
the
kind of an unforgotten
it.
miniseries.
Yes, I never read it. I after reading it, I want to go pick it up. After you said it, you loved it so
And
much.
that's the point of the book right there, Brad.
Yeah, look,
You want
the
to go
art's
pick it up.
beautiful. The art's
Art's
beautiful,
gorgeous.
and that's crazy. It's that old,
I
1991,
know.
30-year-old book.
This is one of the little gems I found
Mhm,
in reading all this stuff. I thought this is really a great story, and I kind of wish they would have continued it
right.
because I said there's some really cool villains in it that I've never seen before. I
Yeah.
love the artwork. The writing was great. It was a real World War II setting. I thought it was great.
Is it a bit of the history of Cap going in to sign up for the war, or what's
A
the
little
gist of?
bit. He's just
Yep.
become Captain America. Um, and Bucky kind of figures out who he is.
Okay.
And I mean, look at even the Red Skull art is just
Yeah, it looks
great.
great. Looks great. Let's see. There's some more interior art from it.
And that looks like it's kind of from the movie.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah, check
That
it
could be
out.
Chris Evans right there.
Yeah, if you find a copy, check it out. It's a great story.
Yeah. I think it's up on Marvel Unlimited. I subscribe to that, so
It
I think
is.
I'll
It is.
check
Yeah,
that out too. More Jeff Loeb, Tim Sale. I think this was the last one they wrote. I think
it
because
was, and it came
yeah,
years later. And there's a big
2001. It
gap
was
between, I think, some of the issues, as I remember.
yes. I don't. It was like the fifth or I remember they released a zero issue, and then they
Yes, or
released
like
like
I
the
think for one of the cons or something.
right. Yeah. I guess did they start it in 2008 and they finally
Yeah,
finished it?
I told you there was a
It's
big gap.
wow, 8 years to make that book. Wow.
Yeah,
But it was worth it. It's another classic. It looks great. Look at Bucky just hanging out up there. And more interior art from Cap White. There you go. And then the Mind Bomb from the 70s
with
where
Kissinger,
oh
Henry
yeah,
Kissinger, right
Henry
there.
Kissinger right there. Kirby saw that. If you ever, I like that you put this in there. Did you notice the face?
Yeah,
The so that's a Kirby face, and John Romita was the editor, and he drew the face right there.
yeah,
So
I know.
he often redid faces, but that's a classic. I had in grade school. I had that cover on a Mead folder in
Oh,
first grade.
funny.
Mead made those for school supplies. But look at that full
Well,
page.
that's the other thing with trying to pick the cover images.
Yeah,
We wanted something contemporary but really kind of classic at the same time.
right. And here's the chapter 2 with the corporal. Good looking image there. And this is Ron Garney. I like Ron Garney's stuff from
Yeah.
back in the yeah. He is a great artist that did the Spider-Man Back in Black where he took on the Kingpin.
Yep. Mhm.
Just a great stuff with him and Mark Waid was great. Oh, that's a Superman pose, but it works.
It does.
And you talk a bit about Sharon Carter coming back, and Greg and Tim Hildebrandt with this one. I remember that.
Yeah, we not only do we have art from the comics, but we had, we sometimes we got some variant covers or
Yep.
additional promo art that they use for stuff. So
Greg Hildebrandt. Yep. I think that was on their trading cards in the 90s when the Hildebrandts did the Marvel
yeah,
Masterworks. Those were so pretty. And that's our last cover image. So um, let's see. If you want to ask some questions to us, we're going to wrap it up in about 10 minutes, but I want to talk a little bit about the Hulk book that's coming out. When is that coming out?
that's coming out spring of next year.
Okay.
I'd have to look at the date real
Here
quick.
I've got a cover and
If you click on my author page, you'll see it there on Amazon.
I have it right here.
I think it's April. I think it's April, but I'm not 100%
Okay.
positive.
So, The World Breaker, Hero and Icon. Talk about this book coming up. April 25th, 2023. There we go.
And that is a Canadian price, just so nobody has a heart attack.
Okay. I'll pull up Amazon on it in a second.
Yeah.
Talk about the Hulk book.
Again, we try to divide it up by, and I think we use like gamma, alpha, or something like that to do the levels. It's oh no, we don't do it that way. I forget how we did it. Anyway, it's again, beginning with the origin story of the Hulk, the different versions of the Hulk, Red Hulk, She-Hulk. There's some really cute stuff in there about She-Hulk.
Oh yeah.
It was interesting when I was writing the book, it was just announced that the TV show was coming out.
Right.
So we beefed it up a little bit to add some presence for her.
Yep.
I think you'll enjoy the stories in this one. I don't want to give too much away.
I am a big Hulk's number 2 for me. Spider-Man, then Hulk. So
why is Hulk number 2 for you?
2 words: Lou Ferrigno and Bill Bixby. So I would watch
the TV show that really did it for you.
Oh, the TV show. Well, I'd watch Spider-Man and on the Electric Company in the 70s, and then Friday nights I'd watch Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno. And when I went to the gas station and I saw Spider-Man and the Hulk on a comic book, it blew my mind as a little kid. These are my 2 favorites fighting
That's
together.
funny.
So that's sealed it for me with the Hulk. How about you?
So
how did you enjoy it? First get introduced? Was it Bill Bixby or the 60s cartoon?
No, it's the comics. I was reading the comics.
Okay.
I didn't really watch the show that much.
Okay.
Actually, recently when I was writing it, I went and bought the Blu-ray of the complete series and started watching it.
Yep.
What did you think of the film versions of Hulk?
I can't stand the Ang Lee one. I just cannot stand that one. I like the Ed Norton one. The Hulk that I love was seen in Thor Ragnarok, where he talked. He was badass. The Hulk in the last 2 Avengers movies is not my favorite. I like him just being mean, green, and not a professor.
So what do you think about some people say like the Hulk is a little bit about, split personality.
Yep.
You agree
Multiple
with that?
personalities. Yeah, absolutely. He was traumatized as a kid, and he had that even separated. I love scenes, and they've never done it, with the exception of the Bixby series, where he goes into the mind. And in the Bixby series, at one point, he's in a desert, and the Hulk is in a jail, and the Hulk is trying to get out. And then Bixby keeps running away, and the Hulk is right behind him. So I think in the films, it would be great to do a mental scene of the Gray Hulk and the Green Hulk and Banner talking.
So in the comics, do you like it better when the Hulk is one, or when he's split up into Banner and Hulk?
I like the no, I don't like. I like them being 2 people. So
like physically 2 people.
Physically 2. Well, I mean, he transforms into, I guess 1 is the answer.
Well, there are stories where he is physically 2 people.
Exactly. Yeah. John Byrne did it back in the 80s where he separated him. No, I like the I like the duality of it. I like him. If he gets angry, he turns, but he also mentally talks to the Hulk like, really, I want control. No, I've got control. It's a juggling match in his brain, which I like. I don't like him working with the Hulk. I like it being a fight mentally, and That's just my personal take. But
Okay.
yeah,
There was I
what
remember there was a Hulk video game years ago that was kind of fun because it's
Ultimate
basically his.
Destruction?
Yeah, you could just smash things. You could throw a cow if you wanted to.
That's where they got in the second movie where they did the thing where they ripped the car. You could rip the car in that video game and put it on your hands. And when I saw that
Oh
in the
god, that's
movie, I
right.
was
I forgot. I haven't
like,
played this in years.
yeah, it was on PlayStation 2. I had that, and it was
Yeah.
fun. A comic writer who I've interviewed wrote that game. Paul Jenkins is his name. He did the
I know about
Inhumans.
that for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he wrote that video game. So,
Yeah.
and he wrote Hulk a couple years before that video game. But Paul's a great guy. But I love that video game. Nice to talk to somebody that knows that video game. We
Yeah,
have
so
your
here's
biggest fan,
well,
Ultimate Spider Plush, says that Hulk book is coming out on my birthday. So that's how they
oh,
planned it.
good.
And Matt wants to know about how many pages each book is.
They're 228.
228. Yep. So, like
All
we
of them.
said, it's a big coffee table type book. You see it right there. Very thick book. Great for
Yeah,
the
heavy paper,
holidays.
printed in Italy.
Oh, nice.
Really great print job. Just gorgeous design on it. I'm very proud of these.
Yeah, they're really
Very
pretty.
proud of these.
And
there's 3
Trayvon
more
says
coming.
can't wait to read it. And how many more are coming? You said
Right now we're doing a total of 5. So we
5.
got the 2 that are out: Cap and Spider-Man, Hulk, and then 2 more after that. I'm starting to write the 4th one right now.
Okay. Will that come out later next year, or is it going to be?
It might be coming out. It's to be determined. It might be fall of next year. We'll figure it out.
Cool.
Because I'm actually going to Frankfurt Book Fair next week, so I downloaded a bunch of the comics on the app. So how I'm writing it right now, I've got a little device that I can write, and it turns it into text with my handwriting.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so I can have the iPad here with the comics and read them, and make notes and start writing it as I go. So that's
Right.
what I'll be doing on this 5-6 hour flight to Germany next week.
Well, there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Hopefully, you can come back and we talk about the Hulk book. I'm just a big fan.
Absolutely,
It's not
Brad.
called the Hulk
Yeah.
Crawl Space, but I can talk Hulk all day.
That's all right. I'll be there. It's been a pleasure,
All right.
Brad.
Well, Rich, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for coming on, man.
You're welcome. Take care.
You
Bye-bye.
too. Bye.